It doesn't add up, Train said. Sitting in the chair with his hands cuffed behind the back wasn't very comfortable, but he tried to assume as relaxed a posture as possible. At least Quan's thugs had used power cuffs, which were relatively gentle on the wrists unless you started to twitch. Steel ones would have been a lot worse. Kay, you have to realize that your version of the story doesn't work. If we'd really killed your men back home on Backwater and then went on this crazy raid on the temple, why on earth would we show up here in such small numbers, knowing that you'd survived to meet us? Kay was sitting at the table across from Train, staring somewhere in the steel wall past him. With his impassive expression and almost complete immobility, he reminded Train of the statues and images of the ancient deity that adorned almost every corner of the celestial temple. It was his hands, however, that gave him away. The fingers of Kay Kwan's right hand drummed on the metal surface of the table, while his left hand was absent-mindedly patting his breast pocket. From the moment Kwan's men had pushed Train, Kaylina, and Shank out of the shuttle and separated them into different rooms, Train had no idea what had happened to his friends. However, he wasn't too worried about their fate. Kay Kwan wasn't the type prone to making hasty, drastic decisions, a Kwan family trait. They were always waiting to act until they got to the bottom of whatever was happening around them. Train wanted to get to the bottom of it as much as the master of the Celestial Temple. I know it doesn't add up, Kay Kwan finally said. Although, at first, I thought your crazy veteran had finally gone completely off the rails. Don't argue, he said, glaring at Train, though the latter was as quiet as before. I know he hates me, or rather not me, but our whole station. Kwan waved his hand. Everyone has their own demons. As long as people kept them in check, I didn't care too much. But now I realize that massacres aren't Klaus's style. Train grinned. If it's any consolation, he told me himself that he'd rather put a couple of antimatter torpedoes into the station, he said. He thought it would be more reliable. Exactly. And he certainly wouldn't have started by eliminating my men at your place. And you three wouldn't have come here as if you were taking a walk. Kwan looked hard at Train. But someone killed my men. Killed them on your station. D-13 doesn't belong to the Backwater family any more than the Celestial Temple belongs to the Kwans, Train pointed out. The station is under Federation jurisdiction. We even pay taxes. Kwan waved his words away. Don't play dumb, Train. Keep this smokescreen for somebody else. Everyone knows how it goes. You may not have sole control of the station like you did in the lawless days of yore, but that doesn't change much. Backwaters are backwaters. Exactly, Train said stiffly. That's why we're just as interested as you are in finding out what the hell's going on at the station. I was ambushed too, by the way. And Shank and Kaylina were in the hangar where your men were killed. Kaylina was wounded when she tried to pull one of them out of the crossfire. Kwan was silent for a while, then unzipped his breast pocket and tossed a small object onto the table in front of Train. I'm not an idiot, he said in a strangely slightly changed voice, and Train suddenly realized what a storm of emotion was simmering beneath the man's outward impenetrability. But the facts tell a different story. How do you explain this? Train looked at him. The hands, he said calmly. Kwan stared straight into his eyes. Oh, come on, Kay, Train said. What are you afraid of? I'm not going to jump on you and try to strangle or bite you to death. Kwan thought for a few seconds, then nodded faintly. All right, he said curtly, turned in his chair and pressed the button of the mini remote control on the small shelf by the door. But be warned. The doors are locked, and my guards don't care if you take me hostage. You'll get shot. Train didn't even bother to react to that warning. As soon as he felt the power cuffs release his wrists, he leaned forward and picked up what Quan had tossed on the table a few seconds ago. It was a chip card, the usual means of payment on all inhabited worlds. The first thing that caught Train's eye was that it had been issued by the Second Federal Bank branch at Backwater Station. There was nothing particularly incriminating about that, though. Train was sure that even Quan himself had the card issued by that bank. But the name on the card, Chug Stanger. Chug was one of Delmain's closest aides and the fourth most senior member of the Ring. But he was supposed to be on the other side of the Federation right now, negotiating with an independent company on the Blue Flash for supplies. Well, very important supplies that the Ring had high hopes for. How could his card be here, on the Celestial Temple? Train raised his eyes to Kay. "Just the card?" he asked. Quan grinned. "Wasn't that enough for you?" "No, we didn't find Chug himself, dead or alive. But I would very much like to know how his card ended up in the pile of bodies of my men." Train shook his head slowly. "Kay, I swear I have no idea. Chug should be hundreds of light years away from here right now." Quan stared at him silently. Train couldn't read anything on this stone face. He understood that his life, as well as the lives of Kylena and Shank, depended on the thoughts and feelings of this short man, who, in fact, was only a little older than Train himself. "I believe you," Quan said finally, "if only because, apart from this card, we found nothing to link the attack to you. It was obviously planted. Wait." He raised his hand, though Train wasn't really going to say anything. Even if it was, it wouldn't make much difference. If someone went to great expense and terrible risk just to frame the backwaters, it's all the more dangerous for us. Do you understand? I don't know what you've gotten into, but these side effects... After all, people died. Good people. What am I going to tell their friends and loved ones? A lot of them weren't even related to my family. "I knew Chung," Train said grimly. "He didn't deserve this." Quan grimaced like from physical pain. "None of them deserved it, and the problem of retribution is now on my shoulders." "Can you answer one question?" Train looked at Quan. "I have some information that might help, but I must be sure first." "I'm listening." Quan shrugged. "But I can't promise an answer." "Have you determined what weapons were used in the attack?" Quan looked at him incomprehensively. "Pulse rifles and pistols. You saw it yourself. What did you expect? Muskets and halberds?" Train shook his head impatiently. "I'm not talking about the model. I'm talking about where these weapons were made. You can't tell much from the hits. But did you find anything? I don't know. Empty energy cells or something?" Quan paused for a second, then pressed a button on his communicator and quickly spoke a phrase in a language Train didn't recognize. He waited a while, then listened to the answer and reverted off the communicator. "What do you know?" he said quickly. "If you knew something about the attackers, why did you keep silent? Why didn't you say anything from the beginning?" "Ullerian army hardware?" Train asked instead of answering. Quan nodded gravely. "The control room was clean, but my men found several empty energy cells and a melted magnetic shutter in the repair shops. They were inspected by a man of mine named Wong. He'd been here as far back as... well, as far back as my grandfather's time." Train nodded. "In grandfather's time" meant during the Ullerian occupation. Good thing Klaus isn't here, he thought. Anyway, he recognized the whole thing. Said it was from old Army Ullerian models. They haven't been manufactured since practically the end of the war. He looked at Train. "Your turn." "The attack on our station, the one that killed your men and wounded Kylena, was also done with old Ullerian weapons. Plasma turrets. Also, someone ambushed Klaus and me in the same way. We were luckier. Quan was silent for so long that Train was about to make his presence known, but then Kay spoke. We value our independence, but it's a very fragile thing. After my grandfather died and the Ullerians left, my father negotiated with the then Federation Fleet Command to maintain our status as an independent station. The Navy had enough problems elsewhere, and the Temple was too small a station to make sense to keep a garrison on it. You, he cast a quick glance at Train. Had it different, I know. A former major trading and transportation hub after all. I guess the feds had big plans for you, and they just didn't care about us. We ended up almost evenly matched, although you've got Kishida, and we're on our own. Kishida was blown up, Train said. With a Ullerian charge too, right in our dock, our family dock. He survived but won't be back to business for a while. Quan spoke a few unintelligible words in a low voice, but their intonation required no translation. It was a swearing. Someone is rocking the boat as hard as they can, he said. That someone was counting on our families going at each other and having a bloodbath after the attack at the stations. Luckily, we've avoided that. For now. But I'm not a dictator, no matter how it looks from the outside. If I don't find those responsible, the relatives of the victims will ask me differently, and they can take matters into their own hands. Besides, even if we don't start a war but the attacks continue, the feds will ignore the special status of the Celestial Temple and your freedom, and they'll do a brutal purge as they see fit. I don't know anyone who would benefit from that, Train admitted, not even the feds themselves. Besides, that kind of intrigue isn't their style. Kay nodded, but Train could see that he had his doubts. Finally, Quan seemed to make up his mind. We have to work together, he said. We have to find the source of the threat, or we're all finished. Agreed? Yes. One condition, Quan said. Keep Klaus away from my men. Otherwise, it will end up really messy. Of course. Train shrugged. He's off somewhere outside the Federation now anyway, picking up some of his old contacts, trying to find out where heavy wartime Ullerian weaponry might have gotten to the station from. There aren't many places like that unless you count the core Ullerian planets, which we ruled out immediately. Yes, it's not in their nature to do dirty stuff under the radar, but there's something else. Quan rose tiredly, and opening the door, invited Train out with a nod. There's another place where you can get such weapons. Holy shit, Shank muttered, looking around dazedly. There's enough stuff here to arm a whole bloody army. In fact, 2 armies, 4 fully deployed and manned Ullerian assault brigades, Quan said. But with relatively little ammunition. Ammunition was supposed to be supplied separately. Racks of weapons towered high and deep into the dark depths of the giant hangar. Pulse rifles, hypervelocity rocket launchers, plasma guns, on turrets and handheld, all sorts of kinetic weapons, Ullerian assault armor, helmets. It was really everything you needed to arm a full-fledged military unit. That was the price we agreed to with the Ullerians, Quan said. We host the warehouses and they bypass us. They were still hoping to come back then. Grandfather bet that they wouldn't, and his bet won. And you've been sitting on all this since the war? Train shook his head incredulously. That's a real bombshell. The feds. They don't know shit about it, Quan said stiffly. They don't have to know. Do you have any idea what would happen not only to my people, but to the population of the entire station if it became known that the largest existing Ullerian arsenal in the galaxy is based here? And if someone were to leak it? Quan sighed. Only a handful of people, no more than a dozen at most. know what is hidden deep inside the station. Family members and a couple veterans from the war. All of them are well aware of what will happen if someone leaks information. That includes you, by the way. I hope you realize that if anything happens, Backwater Station will be in the crosshairs too. Train and Shank looked at each other. Sure, Shank said. Sure thing, bro. But still, it's just freaking mind-boggling. All these years. Quan sighed again. I'm going to have to do the very unpleasant task of turning everyone who knows about the arsenal inside out. But I don't think the weapons came from here. I'm the only one who knows the security codes, and the only way to disable it is to scan my neural print. Any break-in would end in alarm and the intruder's death. Or rather, his death first, and then the alarm. The system was installed by Ullerian intelligence. Train suddenly felt very uncomfortable in the huge, dusty hall, crammed with the most sophisticated instruments of mass murder. Ullerian security systems were renowned for their lethality and selectivity. He'd never believed the Ullerians knew how to tune them to human neural processes, but after Quan's words, his confidence was shaken. Was there any attempts? Quan smiled, but there was no warmth in this smile. A few, very few. Train decided not to investigate further. They'd left Kylena on the ship, at Quan's request, and because they didn't want to leave the ship unattended. A treaty was great, but they better ensure Quan's men hadn't bugged it all over. Better be safe than sorry, as they say. Can I tell my father? Train asked as they exited the arsenal, which the station's schematics had labeled as a radioactive waste repository. I think he should know too. Quan shook his head. No. Why not? Kay, you can't go rogue in a case like this. The look in Quan's black eyes pierced through Train. Because I'll tell him myself. Train stared at him. I'm coming with you, Quan said. It all started at Backwater Station, and that's where it ends. Quan shook his head. No. Why not? Kay, you can't go rogue in a case like this. The look in Quan's black eyes pierced through Train. Because I'll tell him myself. Train stared at him dumbfounded. I'm coming with you, Quan said. It all started at Backwater Station, and that's where it ends.